Okay, hopefully everyone can hear us and everyone's tuning in. I'm Chelsea Pettit. I'm head of arts at the Boggery Foundation, for those who are watching. And today we're pleased to present the final piece of the puzzle, which is the work Loving Lonely, A Conversation by Shagufta Iqbal. This was the winning commission of our written word category for the At Home in the World open call, which was from earlier this year. Loving Lonely, A Conversation was created during the lockdown in the UK, and it's inspired by slips of notes and pictures that Iqbal and her children exchanged when they were leaving for their father's home and coming back to her. Each week throughout July, she shared a series of images on our social media platforms with some really beautiful poetry and words written on top through collage. You can view the entire set of those on our website. So do go ahead and look at that. But today, we're going to hear a live performance that's inspired by this as a culmination of that work. For those who don't know, Shagufta was longlisted for the Jerwood Poetry Prize and is a poet, filmmaker, workshop facilitator, and TEDx speaker. Her poetry collection, Jam is for Girls, Girls Get Jam, has been recommended by Nikesh Shukla and she's been published in the Slam Anthology with Macmillan. In 2018, she co-founded Kyoto, a support organization for POC creatives in the Southwest. She's also the founder of the poetry collective, the Yoniverse, which gives a platform to South Asian female poets and aims to encourage young women from the South Asian community to participate in spoken word and poetry. Following her live performance, she'll be joined by her publisher, Bridget Hart, co-editor of Burning Eye Books, for a Q&A. Burning Eye is the biggest publisher of spoken word, performance, and slam poetry in the UK, and it's also based in the Southwest. Feel free to, after this video is posted, put some comments, some questions and comments in the comment section underneath, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. Now over to Shagufta.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. Although I'm absolutely clueless about how many people are in the space. That's the world of digital performance. And thank you very much, Chelsea, for introducing me so nicely. And thank you to Boggery for choosing this piece of work to be part of the At Home series of conversations, I think. It's something that I kind of really thought was a private piece of art and thought, actually, I want to share this because I think currently we all want to share our private stories because so much of our life is happening indoors in the four walls around us during lockdown. And I think it's just, particularly as a parent, you're constantly thinking, am I doing the right thing? Am I holding the space in the right way? And it was a really good way of starting that conversation and exploring those themes. And it is a really nice way of just engaging my children also in a project during lockdown. So it's like, you do have homework, we have schooling, and we're writing bits of work together. And all of this work came through all of three of us would sit down at times and write creatively, and some of the lines from the poetry actually come from them personally, are credited to my children. They've made it quite clear I've got to make a note that it was written by Idris Ahmed and Medea Gorsa as well. And between us, we sort of reframed and reshaped the world as we saw it. And so the work I'm going to share now is from a sort of an overarching piece from the small series that I shared in July, and it sort of comes together in a final piece with images that we took of our lockdown experience. So I'm going to do a screen share now and share the presentation. And then what I'll do is I'll read the poem as well, which is called A Handful of Home, which I felt was quite fitting with this project, but also with what's going on in the world. So let's see how tech savvy I am. A handful of home. A handful of home. Your feet are as heavy as eyelids. They crush mint as they go. That walk, it shames the air, tells everyone the tale of how you want to be reborn with wings instead. Manifest yourself as love in this violent place. Stop the frost from gathering at your throat while you sing out another version of this world. One where buildings have all disappeared and they've been replaced with fields, mountains, lakes, and just the one beacon of a lighthouse. And I share it with you, my children, where water cannot hold fish, sky cannot hold moon here, horizon cannot hold fingertips of grass blades here. Hands swing heavy between us, knuckles white, fingers entwined, hand in hand, we walk like that, hand in the shadows, under a burning night, in silence, in a complete silence, side by side with your prayers caught in my throat. I do not know when I first noticed my hands resembling my mother's. It was a gradual, reluctant recognition. Folds of skin settling gentle as snow, vibrant veins, loud crease between thumb and forefinger. I remember being a child and watching my mother's hands age, not her face, or her eyes, or her hair. She remained the same in my memory, and sometimes when I see an old photo of her, I'm taken aback at how my eyes did not see the passing of time. And now I walk with my children, my daughter always holding on to these old hands of mine, her hand always reaching out to close the gap, that space between us. The way she holds my hand tells me so much about her. The way the energy in this small fist runs through my fingers and explodes in my chest, it makes me realize that this world is the size of a giant, but it cannot hold the whole of our truths. It cannot hold the whole of our hearts. And when we will walk its body once again, we will walk knowing that we have survived it all, separate as stars, but held together by a love that spans the expanse of this universe's singular breath. In this world, I hold my hand out behind me, and I am met with such a sense of belonging when my child grabs a hold of these fingers of mine. I know there is someone there, at my side, and what power this little hand wields. It can make me feel I have come home. I have come home to a place where there are yellow flowers. Everything suspends with hope, potential, the absurdity of possibility. I hold the truth close to my chest, make sure it stays feather tight, tend to it daily, and I wait and I listen for it to sing back with a heartbeat. Thank you. So that was the piece I wrote, which was inspired very much by the letters that we leave each other at home. Lots of those letters are often, I'm really sorry, I ruined your things, and then question marks in terms of, will you accept my apology? And that's the kind of family we are. So yes, hopefully you enjoyed that piece and related in some way to your own experience of lockdown. And I'm sure Bridget's got a couple of questions.
Hello.
Hello. I'm all right. I'm wondering if you recognise some of the pieces, because I wrote some of that during the Rebecca Tantoni workshop that you and I both were on.
Yeah, I've got a question about that actually.
Oh.
Just that I recognise a couple of the lines from Rebecca's workshop, and there's probably other stuff that's cropped up for you in other workshops and things that you've done. But one thing I've known about you in this lockdown period is that you've been very active. You know, there's a couple of projects that you've been doing, as well as all the stuff that you've been just doing with your kids. And I wanted to ask how galvanizing has home life been for you to throw yourself into creativity? And how have your children kept you motivated?
Ooh. Motivated and also distracted.
Yeah.
to I think I'm now sort of thinking, what did I do with all my time? Like, why was I not more productive when they were at school? And so those small windows where I get to do work is such a blessing. But I think I'm really productive because I know I've got 1.5 hours while they're having lunch. I've got maybe a couple of hours when they've gone to bed. So it's been quite, I think in some ways inspiring, because I realize that I can get the stuff done that I need to, but in other ways it's sort of just been quite a big trying to balance everything. And this is something I think a lot of people, when I speak to them, especially parents, are talking about the difficulty of it and the guilt in terms of, am I doing enough for the kids? Are they entertained enough? Are they doing enough schoolwork? And in some ways, I remember my own parents over summer holidays would just leave us to it. And I got to the point where I thought, you know what? That's not a bad thing. I don't need to occupy them all the time. I could just leave them to it, and they will make the biggest mess, but create something or do something. And I think that's really important, those gaps and spaces of time where they feel like they're really bored, but then do something, because that's where imagination should kick in. And children are brilliant at that. So I think getting them to constantly engage in something, whether it's learning or reading or whatever it is great. But I think they need to have that time to then be able to just make a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right there about giving kids space to be able to do that. My mum did that with me. I'm from a single parent household as well, just me and my mum. And I would just go off on the estate all the time for hours on end and build dens and bushes and, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And I loved it. It was great. It is good to give space for imagination. I think, like, especially when you're in lockdown as well, you know, there's that pressure to feel occupied all of the time. It's a pressure for adults that they have to work or be doing things all the time. Otherwise they're failing at lockdown or, you know, whatever it is. And actually, yeah, sometimes we come up with the best things when we just allow ourselves space and time to sit with things.
And make a mess and probably get up to no good and get up to mischief. I'm sure your mum would like back me up with that. She's like, Richard was gone for a while, but she wasn't just building a den. But I think I get really annoyed, but then I'm like, actually that's part of exploring. That's part of, okay, so she's broken something, to fix it again. And the amount of times I've read famous engineers saying, oh, I used to break things all the time and then I'd fix them again. And I'm like, maybe she'll become a famous engineer. Never break these things. It's fine. In the long run it'll pay off. Yeah.
So my mum worked full time when I was a kid, so I was on my own a lot anyway. But when she wasn't at work, I used to love having her at home, because she would build me these amazing like dens in the living room with like elaborate like tunnels, and she would turn my bedroom into like a shop or a hotel or whatever it was, just, or a fairyland, you know, just with the whatever she had laying around in the house. A lot of it was like sheets and pegs and things like that. And it was really good for my imagination and resourcefulness of using things around the house, like making do. Like, you don't need the best of everything. You've got what you need right there in the house. And I think there's a real special trust and bond with single parents and kids. Like, me and my mum are almost siblings, as well as mother and daughter. There's like a bit more of a complex thing going on there with trusting. And I like that in terms of the way that you've used these letters to write each other. And I'm really interested in these letters that you've been writing. What inspired you to start off doing that, and have any unexpected things come out of it?
Yeah, I think so we try not to have too many phone calls when they have gone to their dads, or vice versa, because it can be quite unsettling. So they've only been going back and forth for about 2 years now, so it's not been a big long adjustment period for them. I know 2 years sounds like a lot, but actually in terms of coping with a new way of living for young children, it can be quite disorientating. And I think I've noticed a lot with Medea, she's only starting to process it now, because she was a lot younger. and then sees friends around her who have family units where they all live together. So all the questions are now being raised. So I didn't like the idea of, if I miss them, should I call them on the weekend because they might be doing something fun and they've forgotten all about the fact that they've left a mum behind, and I'd rather they just enjoy what they were doing at the time. And currently I think they're doing a lot of learning how to cycle. So the letters are a way of kind of being able to connect with each other without intruding on the weekend space. And so if you do feel like you've missed somebody or you feel a bit lonely, you can pull out a letter. And then if they want to make a phone call, they can, but there is also something there that's continuing our relationship and our conversation without a kind of cold turkey. So I think as a parent, you're constantly struggling about getting the balance right between letting them go and enjoy themselves, and also how much of it is my own, oh, I've got to let my kids go and I'm not going to see them for 2-3 days, and they're probably really fine with it once they're there, and I'm just coming along and maybe putting them into a negative space by trying to communicate. So I think the letters are a really good balance. I feel like I've given something of myself to them, and oftentimes, like I said, we apologize to each other because we'll have difficult weeks, or we'll have somebody's destroyed some, and constantly living on top of each other. So Medea will do something where she'll have an art project, but it will be at the top of the stairs. So it's like, this is my display, and it's like, well, we need to walk around it, so somebody might step on something. So it's great building dens and doing all these things around the house, but we also need to live in the house, because at one point during lockdown in the UK, we had only 1 hour a day where we were allowed to leave the house. So it was really quite tough. I mean, in some ways, we were very fortunate because we've got a small courtyard garden. So we do have that outdoor space. I know there are many people who don't have the outdoor space and really struggled to be cooped up. And so it was quite tough living on top of one another. So apologies seem to be the dominant feature of our letters, but also it would end with, but next week we're going to do this, or so a kind of, let's look forward to, when you come back we'll do something exciting and something fun. So that's kind of what the content of the letters were, but we also wrote each other little, so we did one poem that was just based on the acronyms. So it was the first letter of each person's name, and then Medea wrote one for Idris wrote one for me, and it was just kind of how we see each other, because we spent a lot of time around each other. And I think that's something about you were saying about trust is between parent, child, and single parent relationships. When I take them, if we go out or if we're doing certain things, I don't have a partner in the house to say, oh, could you pack there, this, and I'll do this, and then we get out, or we'll do this. It is very much me turning to Idris or Medea and saying, could you do X, Y, Z, because I can't do it all on my own. And so that's when, in many ways, as a young child, you have to take a responsibility which you wouldn't have done if you were probably living in a full household. And it's something I do write about in some of my other work, because there is a guilt around that. Initially, when I started, I was thinking, I really need the help. I need him to go upstairs and get the X, Y, or Z while I'm packing downstairs before we leave the door because we're getting late. But now I'm thinking, oh, it's probably a life skill. Character building.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with that. I was the same in my house, and actually I have way more common sense than a lot of people that I've come across in my life, because I learned basic life skills and from a very young age, and the way in which you are operating by writing these letters and it's such a good lesson in communication and boundaries, which I think a lot of kids don't necessarily learn. And what a time to learn that in lockdown as well, and I think that's beautiful. And also, yes, it becomes about a team unit rather than it being parents, kids, and that separation. You're breaking down those boundaries by including them in the tasks, so that they don't just think, oh, the fairy did it.
Yeah, the dishes just get washed, the laundry just gets done. No, there is a whole, let's sort out the socks, we're doing that together.
Yeah,
it's a joint responsibility.
And children are often the subject of creativity, but then to have them directly involved in the process speaks back to that communication and boundaries thing again, and that team effort. Are they happy to be involved in this project with you, or is it something you've had to encourage? And did you all decide the themes for each week?
I decided the themes,
Okay.
and I asked them to do bits and pieces of work, which they quite enjoyed because they were given set work from school. And it was like, well, we could do your English homework from school, or we could do this. And then they were like, let's do that. As much, let's do that. So they're fully on board because the alternatives were much harder, I think. But I think from a young age, they're used to living the life of artist children. So I'm often dragging them along to festivals with me. So yesterday I had them in the Wye Valley. I'm working on another project looking at people of colour, so people from Black, ethnic minority, Asian backgrounds in nature, and how we engage with nature and how particular spaces are available to us. So I had them in the Wye Valley yesterday. The project coordinator was supposed to interview me about my thoughts, and in the end decided Medea was far more articulate than I was. And Medea led the whole interview. So in the end I just thought, you know what, that's fine. And she, I think similar to yourself, I think you had this as well. She was born for the stage. I mean, she's a very expressive, enjoys the limelight kind of character, so she takes to it really well. I think Idris is kind of, he comes along with the journey, enjoys it. It gives him a chance to do something he wouldn't do otherwise, but isn't quite as domineering in this space as much as Medea. But I think he does. He might start off reluctant, but once, and I think that's the thing with kids. Once you introduce them to something, say just try it, give it a go. They don't mind it. I think once they get to the teenage years, it might change, and I might not be able to drag them along to my artsy fartsy things.
I don't know. I feel like there will be a period where they'll have a teenage rebellion, but then when they get a bit older, they'll be like, oh, actually, that was really cool. We're going to go back to that now, you know. So they always come back. We always return. But there's, I laugh because I obviously know Idris and Medea, and you're right. Medea does have such a theatrical way about her, and she is, you know, very good. And I can imagine in these kind of imaginative, creative things, she's very forthcoming with it. But then I've read some of Idris's poetry before, and you know, I think he's got a quieter skill there, and I like that, you know. And you're right about them being at that age where actually they're still, I'm going to say malleable, but I'm going to say malleable in terms of, you know, being, you know, able to focus them on creativity, and then finding that innocence and that joy in it before they hit puberty and everything kind of changes.
Yeah, I mean, saying that, they did the first question they asked when I said, look, this is a project that we're all going to be involved in. It's mummy's work, but let's all have a share in this. Or how do you feel about it? Idris's first question was, how much are they paying you, and what's my cut? I was like, all the innocence is gone. He's already
there.
Individual, yes.
Well, that's it then. You've got Medea is going to be your PR, and then you've got Idris is going to be your accountant, you know, manager. So perfect. A proper family business there, I like it. So you wrote the commission over several weeks, and chose to use snippets, collages and snippets, which is something that's really easy and digestible and internet friendly, and also kid friendly as well, you know, little snippets of quick information. How was the process of fitting all of the pieces together for the final piece? And did anything come out of it after that process?
I really enjoy, because doing the collage work is something that's really interesting for me, because I usually write a poem and it's just on a page, and it's just a series of verses, and I think more people are taking their work to online spaces. They're thinking about how readers engage with that work in a physical way as well. How can you make the reading part of the art? And I've read a couple of other poets who do this really well. So one of the poets is Adrian Earle, who is published also with Burning Eye Books, who does incredible things. You'll pick up one of his books and you've got to turn it around and read it from the back, and it's such a physical experience. It's not just working on the mind, and I loved that. And there's a couple of other poets who do something really fun, and I thought this is a really nice way of layering text over images that can engage immediately and are bright and colourful, and fit well with the theme in terms of it's about childhood, it's about re-engaging with that side of that conversation in art. So that was a fun bit, getting them all to fit together as a final piece. Some of it worked quite well, I think, because I had the themes. It was like, okay, this week it's going to be hands, it was good deeds, birds was one, and that birds piece was actually dedicated to a young girl in Pakistan who died, who was murdered. Her name was Zora, and there's lots of justice for Zora campaigns. So for me, that was happening at the same time, or had just happened, and was very fresh in my mind. And I really felt that I wanted to do something about birds, because the story behind it was about her freeing a bird and the consequences of that. And it was just so gut-wrenchingly difficult to fathom. And then my own children were a similar age. I think it really kind of got us talking about what freedom means, what flight means, what compassion for animals means. And so the work had themes that already existed, and I felt like they came together quite nicely in the at home in the world, because I think that overarching, well, what is home, what makes home, and safety is obviously one of those things. And how do you feel safety? Well, you feel safety in many different ways, but safety in the physical contact, hugs, the sort of the hormones that are released through when you are hugging someone, when you feel loved, when you're touching someone. I think, speaking to a lot of people who are living on their own as well, maybe, and maybe you can relate to this, some of them were saying, I haven't felt the touch of another human being for a month, for 2 months, and I think that was really hard. And I think there were times where just a hug meant so much in that space, because you realize how grateful you are, because there are people who are having to, like grandma, we had to meet her through a window initially, and that human touch is really important. So the work came together through the themes, and I think because we used a lot of collage in the work, it felt quite abstract and quite dreamlike. So the poem at times goes off into strange tangents and strange spaces, but I felt like it, I don't know, maybe the audience will probably have a better idea because they've had to process it and understand it, but it felt like it was working because it was very dreamlike. It's about creating a world, and like you spoke about this idea of, you know, you're making dens as a child, you're making spaces in your own home with what you've got, and that poem is the sort of very or another way of doing that same thing. You create a whole world with what you've got, and those are the themes, and that's what's happening in the world. And so we created a world in these 4 walls through that poem.
Yeah, that's really nice. I like that idea of creating space in a different way. Yeah, I like that. Good. Nice, Shagufta. Deep.
I am an artist.
I was actually going to mention Zora, the Pakistani girl who released a parrot, and how that resonated with you, and how you were talking, you know, you've just obviously mentioned talking to your kids through that. And I think that's such a testament to like the way that you and your children communicate. Like, I don't know if I would have had a conversation with my mum about something like that when I was little. I don't know if that would have been something that we would talk about. And you've, especially in the creative context as well, like how did the 3 of you find hope and find that balance, like to be okay with what was happening?
So in context of worldwide events, I think lots of parents are being forced to talk to their children about things that make them as adults very uncomfortable.
Right.
And that also refers to the Black Lives Matter movement. And so it's things that the children were saying, well, what's going on with Black Lives Matter, and why are we taking to the streets, and what are the protests? In Bristol, we had the statue come down, so it was very much on our doorstep. And I feel like as parents, we're like, oh, I don't know how to talk about racism to my kids because it's just such a horrible, and that's just not just as people of color, but I think also as white parents, you don't know where to begin. But children are amazingly full of hope and resilient, and they actually make the conversation a lot easier and can be really practical and pragmatic about it. And so actually the credit goes to the children, the kids who asked all the questions and found out how much they wanted to know. And I think you gauge it by how they lead the conversation, and then if they kind of show, okay, right, we're done with this now, you can bring it back at a later stage. I think that's kind of how we manage that conversation. But I think it was very difficult for them to understand that things that are happening over there, so way over in Pakistan, or way over in America, affect their lives in any way. And so the more we talked about it, we realized the importance of us addressing these conversations, and how much of a role we have to play in that. So yeah, it was tough, but they made it a lot easier. And I think most parents will probably say the same thing, that there were and I'm sure there's conversations your mum probably had with you where she probably thought, oh my God, I've got to talk to Bridget about this thing. And then as a kid, you're like, okay, cool, right, I get it. And show the right amount of empathy and compassion, but also are able to move forward. So yeah, I think it's a tough one.
Yeah, that sounds very nice in terms of, like, obviously I don't have children, so that wouldn't have ever occurred to me in any way that actually children would make difficult subjects easier for adults to understand. Yeah, just gonna need to sit with that at some point. Yeah, I think you've been you seem to have such a good balance between lockdown, being an artist, being a single parent, and the myriad of other things that you're also doing. And I think there's a lot of negativity in the media about single parents, and about single parents in lockdown. And there's a lot of, like, sort of sympathy narrative or victim narrative almost, in terms of how they're addressed. How much were you wanting to make being a single parent a revolutionary part of this project, in terms of why was that so important to you, to show the life of the single parent?
I think it's really important because we exist, we're here, we run the economy in many ways that are not recognized, and especially when you're an artist, you're constantly being dismissed as an artist because it's not a profession. A lot of people say to me, oh, what do you do? And I say, I'm a writer. And they go, oh, that's lovely, but what do you actually do? So you're constantly, all of your identities are being dismissed. Oh, you're a single parent mum. Oh, okay, right. So you're being boxed constantly. And I think I really wanted to reclaim it, particularly from the point of view of a South Asian woman. My mum, I grew up in a single parent household as well. So my mum was a single parent. And I remember all of the anxiety she had around being a single parent, and thinking as a kid, that's nonsense. Why is she worried about this? Why is she worried about that? It's nonsense. It's fine. She's doing a great job. She's a pain in the butt. She is. But she got us to where we needed to be. And my circumstances are different, and I'm blessed in many ways that my mother wasn't. And I feel that it's important to just show society that we exist and we're here, and we're as normal as every other group of people out there, and we're doing our best, and that's the most we can do. And some of us are doing quite well when we're doing our best, and then we have days where we're just not doing so well at all. So I've had a few weeks where I thought, okay, I'm reading the ball, we're going to have a day trip, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, we're going to do your work, and we're going to be artsy, and we're going to play board games, and we're going to have movie night. And then there's other weeks where I've literally been like, okay, I have to get out of bed and make them breakfast, and I have to I've got to clean, and they need new fresh underwear, and I've got to do the laundry. So, and that's human, we're like that with many different parts of our identity. So I just felt it was really important to bring a conversation about parenthood, about creativity, into an art space, and for it to have a recognition. I don't know if I'm doing a great job or not. I'll find out when they become adults and they can speak for themselves, and I'm sure they will also have issues and problems and say, actually, your mum was overbearing with this, or she overloaded us with this, which is, I suppose, me just kind of, they're guinea pigs. They're my first two. We're just figuring it out as we go along. I'm sure if I had kids 10 years later after them, I'll go, that's where I messed up with these two, but with the fresh lot I'll do a better job. So I think that's why I kind of really wanted to bring the single parent creative narrative into this, because families exist in many different ways and shapes and forms, and we're just trying to figure it out like everybody else. I really hate that narrative around single parents or mums being vilified, because there is so much that they're having to do without support networks, and it's just and I think it's incredibly difficult. I mean, in the UK, you know, retirement age has been raised, so grandparents can't chip in and look after the children. My mum still goes to work, so she can't at times because she's working. So I think I've got a meeting in the afternoon. What do I do with the kids? Mum's at school. My mum's a school teacher. That's the other thing. Teachers had to go to work. Teachers were back at school. So it's like everybody else was allowed to step back apart from teachers. So it's there is nothing that society is doing to make it easier for parents, single parents, and then they're very quick to vilify how terrible a job they are doing, where actually they're doing a job, they're getting on with it, and they need to be recognised and supported for what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I only have one question left now. That I've obviously mentioned that you've been keeping really busy in lockdown with this project and other writing commissions that you've been doing and popping up in Zoom poetry workshops and things like that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're currently working on?
So I'm currently working on another commission with Kate Farewell, which is an organisation that uses artists to have a conversation about climate change. So it's about looking at the facts, the figures, the science behind climate change and climate injustice, and then bringing a human narrative to it. And I've been doing that since it's almost been a month now, through a series of stories and blogging and poetry, and sharing bits around my own journey and understanding of climate change and the impact on different parts of the world, but different communities as well, and how we are trying to reclaim it as people of colour again, as a narrative, because I think sometimes the movement and the conversation around climate change can be very shaming to particular communities. Again, being a single parent mum and not buying enough locally sourced avocados or whatever it is I'm supposed to be doing is constantly put on us as a guilt trip, and so it's about us saying what can we realistically do to help combat climate change, because it's affecting us as much as it's affecting everybody else, and claiming a space in that and being proactive in that, and using art to engage and have conversations with many people from different backgrounds around the fact that vegetarianism is not, or veganism is not, some new fad. There are communities who've been practicing veganism and vegetarianism for a very long time. The Rastafarian community, particularly groups of Hindus, and there are people who practice that on a regular basis and have a long history of food that looks at ways in which that we are not damaging the environment. And being a Muslim, I was really interested in our role in the way in which we consume food, the way in which we have a relationship with nature and the world around us. So that's been something I've been working on for a short period of time, but it's on my Instagram, and I'll be putting up my new shiny website that I'm working on as well. Ooh, shiny website time. And in between that, I'm writing a novel, which sometimes I enjoy doing and love doing, and other times I'm pulling my hair out and thinking, why am I doing this? Why don't I just write a poem? It will be on 3 pages. I don't have to write 50,000 words. I am a poet after all, but I'm enjoying writing the novel, and that's set in the island of Leros during the 2015, well, it's continuously going, but the refugee crisis. And it's a sort of small island, tiny little physical space, but has this huge cross section of society from the world on this island. So you've got the original inhabitants, the Greeks who live there, you've got the refugees from Syria and Afghanistan and North Africa, and then you've got volunteers who are from all parts of the world coming for different reasons, and then you've got NGO workers, and you've got all of this happening on this tiny island, and there's so much around human interaction, human relationships, that I just find fascinating to write about. So those are things, bits and pieces I'm working on at the moment.
Yeah, sounds great. I'm looking forward to reading some of this stuff. And thank you so much for for putting all the poem together and then performing it at the beginning as well. It was really nice to hear it all together as one piece. And you're right, like you said earlier, it's got that very dreamlike, imaginative quality to it, which I think is pretty much how everyone is feeling in the UK now that we're in August and we're still in lockdown.
Yeah, although it changes in September when everybody goes back to school and work, so that's going to be a weird adjustment that we're going to have to make. I think a lot of people have gotten used to being in lockdown now, and going back to a normal life, whatever that looks like, is quite overwhelming. When I first had to leave the house after lockdown and go somewhere other than the supermarket, that was really weird. And I was just like, oh, overwhelming, and there's lots of people around me, and I lost the ability to have informal just people chat and speak to people in a way where it's like, hey, hi, how are you, how is your day, stranger,
No, I think that is a common thing. I like keep having this kind of thing with people. Like, you'll be like, oh, hi, how are you, and both of you are just like, yes. No one knows how to answer that simple question anymore, because it's so complex these days that no one's got a like, oh yeah, fine. No one right now is at a point where they're like, oh yeah, fine. And that's scary, that level of normality going out the window, that these normal social cues that we have are now just kind of feel random and uncomfortable, because there's not a straight answer that you can give anymore. It's been quite interesting to see, but yeah, we'll have to see what it's like in September. Hopefully it will be okay.
But thank you very much, Bridget, just for being my artist buddy.
Oh no, you're welcome. Any day of the week, of the year, of the millennia. I love you and your work and your kids, and you deserve it. So well done, and a great commission. You've done a really good job.
Yeah, I would echo that. Thank you so much, both of you, Bridget and Shagufta, for taking the time to do this today, because I think when we set out doing this project, we didn't know what the kind of final form might take, but, having seen the beautiful imagery come through and all the sort of multi-layered, cross-sectional things you were kind of talking about in these pieces, from intergenerational issues to, family and cultural issues. And now, of course, with lockdown, other kinds of effects on children. It's been a fascinating conversation. Great interview. Thank you again, Bridget, for leading on this.
And thank you for having me.
We can't wait to hear what's next. Shagufta, please keep us posted. Just so everyone knows who's been watching this, we will upload a final video to IGTV and to YouTube as per usual. We'd love to add some subtitle closed caption options for those who need to read what you've said. So we'll be able to share the poetry in words as well, which would be really beautiful to see. And for everyone who wants to know a bit more about At Home in the World, the open call, we've got some of the other commissions that have been posted on our website and on our social media already. And the next one on Facebook Live will be by Noel at De Leon, his next one in Microcosmic Orbit. It'll be his third collaboration as part of this project on Friday, September 18th at 1 p.m. British Standard Time, same as today. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.